You've heard me talk about the problems with fake news in depth on this channel. Dozens of Now This and BuzzFeed response videos later, and I trust that you, by now, recognize that media sources are not trustworthy, stalwart defenders of the truth that they pretend to be. Over the past year, as I've started talking about more serious topics, there's been a change in the way the media operates. I first started noticing this in 2016, and it got especially bad in 2017 after Charlottesville, and throughout 2018, it became ubiquitous. What am I talking about specifically? I'm talking about harassment journalism. Harassment journalism is the practice where a political activist that calls himself a journalist will target an individual, business, or group and use media pressure to destroy his target. Harassment journalists are left-wing political activists that specialize in using their status as a journalist to extort companies into censoring conservative and dissident voices. They threaten to engage in negative publicity and activate their social media mobs if people don't do exactly what they say. You know how it works by now. Someone runs an account on Twitter, does a podcast, or goes to an event. Eventually, their real identity is exposed to the world. The media incites harassment against their family, demands they be fired from their job, and ruins someone's reputation forever. This happens with content creators too. Gavin McInnes, for example, was targeted by harassment journalists and ended up losing his Twitter, PayPal, TV show, and just about everything else. Harassment journalists like to think of themselves as exposing our world's dark underbelly. They're just reporting information. They're telling stories. They will justify their behavior as okay because there is a public interest in the information they're publishing. I think that standard should work both ways. The public has an interest in knowing just who the biggest harassment journalists are. People have the right to be made aware of these shakedown tactics, to be aware that these journalists are not simply shedding light on important news. They are acting as political, ideological activists, using journalism as a tactic. This two-part video series will reveal the top 10 most egregious harassment journalists currently working in America. We will expose their tactics, their symbiotic relationship with far-left, violent Antifa radicals. Journalists, groups like the SPLC and Antifa, all working together to facilitate economic terrorism, censorship, harassment, and the destruction of regular working-class Americans. The beginning of a two-part series ahead in today's video, but first, your chance to own a piece of American history. This is a Morgan silver dollar. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they were used to pay for and buy just about everything. These coins really are 90% solid silver, guaranteed by the US Mint, so these coins are even eligible for your IRA or 401k rollover based on their purity. If you're curious and want to see more, or you're thinking of starting to collect these, you can visit the website at historicsilvercoins.com, where you'll find loads more information, prices, and a great video about the history behind these coins. Go to historicsilvercoins.com and save $5 per coin by using my promo code James. Check it out today. Let's begin with a story you're almost certainly familiar with. The Chronicles of Joe Bernstein, or as Sam Hyde affectionately nicknamed him, Blockhead Joe. Sam Hyde and his comedy group, $1 Million Extreme, had a TV show on Adult Swim that ran in the fall of 2016. MDE is known for their surreal, irreverent, politically incorrect comedy. They were actually transgressive and genuinely funny, hard to come by in today's pee-pee poo-poo orange man bad comedy milieu. Their show attracted the ire of BuzzFeed reporter Joe Bernstein, a man who will likely never write for the New York Times. Bernstein put out his first article attacking the show on August 25th, 2016, 4 episodes in to the show's 6-episode run. His headline was a call to action. Quote, "The alt-right has its very own TV show on Adult Swim. Adult Swim's $1 Million Extreme Presents World Peace is identity content for trolls." End quote. Joe was really onto something here, huh? Scroll down a bit, and he admits, quote, "None of the 3 episodes that have aired so far have touched on politics or the alt-right," end quote. But he's targeting the show anyways because it's just not in good taste. He opens the article by mentioning a Twitter account allegedly belonging to Sam Hyde. Bernstein describes the account as belonging to a quintessential alt-right Twitter user, end quote. His rationale is that the account supports Trump, questioned Hillary's health, retweeted Mike Cernovich and Alex Jones, and doesn't like Black Lives Matter. And then, dishonest little Bernstein implies that the account used the triple parentheses meme to identify Jews, despite Sam's account not actually doing that. It's just a little word trick there, my fellow BuzzFeed readers. I will be linking every article I mentioned today down below, and you can read Joe's work for yourself. He has a problem with MDE's politically incorrect stunts, their real-world performances, and their irreverent antics. His problem isn't with the show content itself. As he noted, the show didn't explicitly mention politics. His problem was with Sam. As Bernstein asks at the end of the article, quote, "Indeed, when the consequences of a culture involve the serial harassment and illegal publication of explicit photographs of a black actress because she had the temerity to stick up for herself, does it really matter whether the people having a laugh over it are in character?" Right. Well, of course, Sam Hyde had nothing to do with hacking Leslie Jones's phone or whatever Bernstein is talking about. World Peace mocked liberal shibboleths, did sketches about middle-aged women hitting the wall, and turned David Duke into a punchline.
David Duke.
Sam Hyde and his show had to be destroyed, which is precisely what Joe Bernstein did. He contacted Adult Swim for comment, because people are really concerned out here, and wrote 2 ensuing articles to keep fanning the flames and creating drama until the situation became enough of a spectacle that Adult Swim canceled the show. There's a ton more to this story, and I'll link a documentary video below, but you get the gist. Joe Bernstein has a problem with Sam Hyde's Twitter and their irreverent comedy. He lies about the show being a breeding ground for scary alt-right neo-Nazi white supremacist propaganda, and blames Sam Hyde for the unofficial promotional materials that he had no involvement with. Does this jibe with your avowed corporate policies? Joe was able to generate enough kvetching about the show that it was eventually pulled, despite doing great numbers and being massively popular. Joe Bernstein is a harassment journalist that destroys people's careers for a journalist's wage, not someone to be trusted, read, or listened to. Our next example of a harassment journalist is Kelly Wheel. Kelly is a writer for the Daily Beast, and your humbled YouTube presenter has long been one of her favorite targets. Kelly's harassment journalism is a bit more direct, a bit more consistent. Her beat is deplatforming. That is, her purpose in the journalistic machine is to write articles that can be used to pressure companies to ban or deplatform individuals and groups and companies from their services. Here are just some of Kelly's award-worthy investigations. Quote, YouTube cracks down on conspiracy theories, finally. InfoWars makes a stealth return to YouTube. How YouTube built a radicalization machine for the far right. Inside YouTube's far-right radicalization factory. PayPal cuts off Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes, Antifa groups, which, as you'll note, she supports in the case of McInnes while totally defending Antifa. Remember that bit about Antifa, because that will be important in just a minute. Kelly's beat extends to yours truly. In June of 2018, she put out an article calling me a Charlottesville hate marcher. Here's the thing. The photo of me with a tiki torch she or her duplicitous editor used was taken several months after Charlottesville, on Halloween, as a Halloween costume. Get it? Yeah, that didn't stop the Daily Beast from literally photoshopping me into a photo from the Charlottesville Torch March to make it look like I carried a torch in the Torch March, which I didn't because I was there shooting video. Doing my job. The dishonesty of journalists really knows no bounds. In January 2019, Kelly followed up with another article about me, where she called me a fascist white nationalist. Again, with no evidence. Evidence and truth doesn't matter when you are a harassment journalist. Your job is to isolate, amplify, and destroy. And that's what Kelly thought she was doing when she did her first article about me getting elected to my position in the local Republican Party. The motivation wasn't just to tell a story. It wasn't human interest. Their motivation was inciting political action against me. Look at the way she frames herself as having exposed me. Is that the language of a neutral reporter or a political activist pretending to be a journalist? Kelly also does promo puff pieces for Antifa. Just a few days ago, she published this nauseating flirtation with literal Antifa members, where they shared their thoughts about the government shutdown. Kelly Wheel is a harassment journalist whose job is to amplify left-wing talking points about YouTube radicalization in order to encourage deplatforming, attack and lie about right-wing political dissidents, and promote and give cover to violent left-wing Antifa activists. Kelly is an activist, not a journalist. Next up is Will Sommer. Will is someone that I used to talk to on Twitter back when he was writing for The Hill. I'll admit, he's not quite as aggressive or petty as many of the other harassment journalists on this list, but his beat is generally the same. In October 2018, he wrote this article for the Daily Beast, quote, Pittsburgh synagogue shooter spewed his hate on Gab, the alt-right's favorite social network. Gab has marketed itself as a home for extremists kicked off of other social media platforms, end quote. Will is trying to imply that Gab should bear some responsibility, some guilt by association, for actions taken by Pittsburgh shooter Robert Bowers. Quote, the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting has put new pressure on Gab, but the shooting could also isolate Gab from the tech companies still willing to do business with it. In the aftermath of the shooting, PayPal kicked Gab off its payment platform. A PayPal spokesperson confirmed to the Daily Beast, end quote. It's amazing to me how they're able to publish articles like this and feel content with their such clear dishonesty. The new pressure on Gab he's talking about, that new pressure comes from the media. The deplatforming by PayPal and others, that comes after pressure from the media. media. Journalists will report on, quote, pressure on companies or public outcry, as if it's a real grassroots thing. It's not. As you're beginning to see, these public outcries for deplatforming all originate from other journalists, and then they write articles citing each other's articles to make the outcry seem bigger than the few cat ladies and blue checks it really is. Will's other groundbreaking reports include crying about Instagram not banning enough people, celebrating Gavin McInnes being banned from Facebook and Instagram, and going through college students' text messages. Will Sommer may present himself as a more moderate voice at the Daily Beast, but he shares the same objectives and tactics of his fellow harassment journalists. And next we have my good buddy Jared Holt. Jared is on my beat like shit on a shoe. I almost feel bad for Jared. He can't even get Twitter verified, and his entire life is spent chasing down shadows, turning people in for violating corporate HR policies or big tech community guidelines. Can you imagine living as the enforcer of Twitter rules and not even getting paid for it? Well, Jared doesn't have to imagine, because that's actually what he does. One man and his quest to get my assistant's Twitter account banned. Very sad. Anyways, Jared's journalism revolves almost entirely around harassment. His job, what he is indirectly paid by George Soros to do, is to whine and kvetch and complain and try to get people fired, deplatformed, and harassed. Starting with PewDiePie, who he targeted for sharing a video from ER. He ran to YouTube to complain that they were running ads from the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Holt claims that they are a hate group. Naturally, being a journalist, he is lying. The Federation for American Immigration Reform is an IRS-recognized nonprofit organization that lobbies to reduce immigration to 1/3 of current levels. Wow, hateful, scary, and terrifying. Ban them from the internet forever. Take away their platform. On a serious note, YouTube does nothing about this guy despite the fact he features white supremacists on his channel. For someone that claims to be a journalist, Jared seems deathly allergic to the journalistic practice of doing an interview. That's another point. Jared, like most harassment journalists, does not actually contact the subjects of his pieces. He doesn't get their side of the story. He doesn't get their comment. Instead, he contacts YouTube, Twitter support, or their employer. He's not interested in reporting the story. He's interested in harassing people's associates to get them banned or fired or somehow punished. The Red Elephants is both racist and anti-Semitic and is also allowed on YouTube. His articles are even worse than his tweets, believe it or not. In January 2019, he attacked Virtual Shield for advertising with me and other conservative pundits. Why is this business marketing software to far-right and conspiracy theorist audiences? Gee, I don't know, Jared. Maybe because it sells? Maybe because we have audiences that like our content, a concept that is wholly alien to you? Incensed that Lauren Southern, Andy Worski, No Bullshit, and myself are all allowed to earn a living and keep a roof over our heads, Jared threw a fit and banged out an angry email to customer service, attempting to get our sponsorships terminated. Thankfully, Virtual Shield totally ghosted him, making me prouder than ever to be working with them. In another article, Holt amplified attacks against the Proud Boys, calling on Amazon to kick them off their web storefront platform, because getting someone banned from selling t-shirts online is really important journalistic work. That is really speaking truth to power. There are countless other examples of Jared Holt engaging in harassment journalism against YouTubers, pundits, companies, and groups. His journalistic purpose is to be a tattletale, a hall monitor, spurring on companies to ban his political opposition from the public space. He is perhaps the most aggressive but least intelligent harassment journalist there is. If he ever reaches out for comment, which I doubt he'll ever do, use the opportunity to flex on him, because he'll definitely get baited when none of these other people will. The last harassment journalist we'll talk about in part 1 of this two-part series is Christopher Mathias. Chris was one of the cisgendered white males that survived the latest round of layoffs at Huffington Post, while so many talented women of color were kicked to the curb. Hashtag HuffPostSoWhite. Anyways, Chris is the one-man army that would prefer to see rural Americans die from a lack of healthcare than allow a man who says mean words online to keep his job as an EMT. A few months back, he targeted Alex McNabb, an EMT in Virginia's rural, underserved Patrick County. They only have 2 ambulances for the entire county, but that didn't stop Christopher Mathias from leading the campaign to get one of their EMTs fired. Alex McNabb is a contributor to the podcast TDS, very popular in right-wing circles. On the show, he did a comedy bit where he told fictionalized, dramatized stories about a fictional EMT character. These were not based on his real experiences, and you can tell they're fiction because of the sound effects, ridiculous dialogue, and, oh yeah, the part where they literally say these are fictional stories. McNabb's fictional character made less than politically correct statements about race. These comedy bits that McNabb did outside of work hours were what Mathias used to generate controversy and whip up a frenzy demanding that McNabb be fired. Again, McNabb was never once accused of impropriety on the job. He didn't talk politics, he never engaged in misconduct, he never treated patients differently because of their race or nationality. By all accounts, he was an outstanding EMT. But Mathias launched a harassment campaign anyways. He sought out to destroy Alex's career over jokes he told on a podcast. McNabb is married and has one young son. He's one of the county's few EMTs, providing life-saving services for the people of rural Virginia. None of that mattered to the harassment journalist clique, though. McNabb was guilty of wrongthink, telling inappropriate jokes, and as such, he had to be destroyed. Let's review. In today's video, we have talked about 5 of America's worst fake news journalists. Not just fake news. The activist journalists we talked about today routinely engage in harassment journalism, inciting internet mobs to destroy their political targets in the name of public interest. I'm often asked, okay, but how do we push back against this stuff? I'll admit, it's extremely difficult. In the old days, journalists that were doing a hit piece on you would at least reach out for contact. They would at least ask your side of the story, and they may report it in a biased way, but at least it would be in the piece. As journalism has become a weaponized political tactic, that has changed. They don't ask for your side of the story anymore. They don't want to hear it. They're not interested. They just want you destroyed, and if they print your side, that's humanizing. Very bad for their goals. The best way to respond to harassment journalism is by denying them engagement. If you're attacked by one of them as a private individual, don't respond. If your business is attacked, set your social media pages to private and wait for it to blow over. It will within a few days. Don't engage with them or their troll armies. They are not approaching you in good faith to tell your side of the story. They're trying to get you to say things they can twist out of context. If you have the resources and you are lied about, fight back with the legal system. All of these harassment journos have said things that could constitute libel or slander. People who are victimized by their tactics should always keep an open mind towards litigation. We still have 5 journalists to talk about, and that video will be coming out shortly after this one. In part 2 of this 2-part series, we will take a look at the track records of Luke O'Brien, Michael Edison Hayden, Andy Campbell, Elizabeth King, and Matt Rivets. We will expand on the connection between harassment journalism, the SPLC, and Antifa, how all 3 work together to accomplish their mutual goals. And we'll further expand on tips you can use to legally respond if you find yourself targeted by a harassment campaign. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all on the flip side for part 2.